We're going to take some time now to talk about chapter 7, and it's on page 134 in your textbook. If you haven't read this chapter yet, I really encourage you to do that, and then to read it again, and maybe again. This is really the heart of real estate. This chapter, this talk about agency, this is so much of what we deal with on a day-to-day basis. The fact is that real estate is changing. There's some pretty big changes that are going on right now. Some what we call disruptors to our business, new business models that are affecting how we do business. Alan Tate just introduced an association with a company that basically, if you've got a buyer who has a house to sell, this company will come in and they'll buy your buyer's house, and now they have cash to buy their next house, right? And which means that they have a much stronger offer when they go to buy that next house. They got a cash offer as opposed to they're getting a mortgage or whatever. And then of course they have to deal with the mortgage later. But it's a really interesting concept, and I'm not even sure that I've got my head around all the ins and outs of it yet. But there are a number of companies out there that are playing with this whole idea. Companies that are buying up houses and then reselling them. Companies that are buying up houses and renting them. Back in the recession days, I sold several houses to America Homes for Rent, which I'm just one broker, and I sold 2 or 3 houses to them. They bought up hundreds, maybe thousands of homes in our area and all over the country. So now they own, tens of thousands of homes all over the country. And these are homes that they were just bread and butter homes, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths. As long as they were in decent shape, they paid good money for them, and they're holding on to them and they're renting them. Now, this has had an effect on our market because the fact is the lower end, if they're all bought up by investors, they're not getting sold, and then the next level gets sold the next level. So we're missing that domino effect. And right now we have a severe shortage of houses to sell. And so the industry changes, but the fact is that what doesn't change is that our business as real estate brokers deal with relationships. Whether you're working with a buyer or seller, we're talking about establishing a relationship of trust, that they're looking to us for information. Now, it used to be that all of the information came from real estate brokers, all the information about houses. But today, all of that information is out there. It's on the internet. So if you want to know how many square foot are in my house, you can look it up, right? If you want to know when it was built, if you want to know how many owners there's been of that house, you can look it all up. But most people don't know where to look that up. And if they did, they wouldn't really know how to interpret that. So my house was built in the 1970s, right? When I first bought my house, it had had 2 owners anyway, and the back side of my house was sided with masonite. How many of you know what masonite is? A few of you. So most buyers, I didn't know what masonite was when I bought it. I wasn't in real estate, I was a teacher, right? But my real estate agent told me about masonite, which is a wood-based product, basically pressed wood. And they told me that if we don't keep it painted, over time some of that water will seep up into the masonite and it will start to expand. So it's like cardboard. Once it gets wet, it's pretty much useless, right? And so I learned that. I couldn't have found that just looking on a website somewhere. Of course, when I bought my house, there was no website. But the fact is that, you know, lots of different things change, but still, they're depending on us to interpret all this data that's out there. They're depending on us to let them know how to look at all that. And so, you know, really it's about relationships and responsibility and representation. Now the textbook jumps right into a bunch of different things. And to be honest, I don't really like the way it's laid out, because for those of you that have never studied the language of real estate, you got all these terms, sub-agency, fiduciary, principal. You may not have any idea what any of those terms meant. Now, all of you have read this chapter, I hope, so maybe you have some idea now. But it is the language of real estate that I think makes this course so hard, is because you're just like Swahili or something. You know, you just walk into it, you go fiduciary. So, so I'm going to start just kind of with some of these definitions, and we'll talk about how we use those as we go along. So first of all, what's an agent? We use that term, we throw that term around a lot. In fact, well, tell me, outside of real estate, where do you hear the term agent? Insurance agent? Yeah. Is that? A sports agent, right. Somebody, boy, I wish, you know, I had a sports agent. Can make you millions of dollars, right? Signing you up for something. I'm sure that Tiger Woods has a pretty good sports agent, right? Just made a whole bunch of money. Yeah, so an agent can be used in lots of different areas other than real estate. And basically an agent is somebody who's working at the behest of somebody else, is working to help that person with a transaction or something. And, well, for instance, my wife sends me out for, you know, eggs and milk and flour because she's making a cake. Might I be her agent? Right? Could be, right? I'm working on her behalf to you know, help her to make that cake. Now, of course, she didn't tell me to get the Cheetos and the bottle of wine, but you know, that's a whole other thing. But so what do all agents have in common? An agent is the individual who's authorized and consents to represent the interests of another. Represent the interests of another. And they're helping a person to do something, basically. So yeah, you can have all sorts of agents. Even attorneys might be an agent for someone. Even a secret agent, right? Or working for the country or something like that, right? Now we, as real estate agents, we don't want to be secret agents because you can't make any money as a secret agent. You want to let everybody know that you're in the business. So I want you to notice the difference in the definition between an agent and agency. Notice here, agency is the relationship between the principal and the agent. So agency is about relationship between the agent and their principal, or between the person that's helping and the person that is being helped. And most of the time, when we talk about an agent, we're talking about a firm. You really need to hammer this into your head, because in almost every circumstance and the problems and questions that you'll see, the agent is the firm. Even though I use that term, I'll say I could be your agent to help you buy a house. Really, that's not a correct use of the term. I could be your buyer's agent, I could be your broker, but the agent is really Allen Tate, because I work through Allen Tate, and Allen Tate is the agent for their clients. And we'll hammer that a million times. This allows an agent to act on behalf of the principal and bind the principal. Now, there's not too many things that a real estate broker can actually bind their seller or buyer to do. I can't make my seller sell their house, and I can't make my buyer buy a house. But there are some circumstances where agents can actually bind their principal. A fiduciary relationship. It's not just, like boyfriend and girlfriend. This is a fiduciary relationship which involves trust and confidence, and oftentimes protecting the financial interests of the person. And so, let's talk about the common law of agency. Where did this concept of agency come from? It came from common law, which is basically the historic idea of agency. It came from the kings and queens having servants that were their agents. If I wanted to have a meeting with another king, I would send my agent out to do that. Or if I wanted to purchase a new throne, I would send my agent to take care of that. And they would work on behalf of me. Now, oftentimes that involved, being enslaved to that king or queen. We don't have that today, but at least as real estate brokers we don't. But essentially this came from European courts and the idea of being the agent for someone else. So engaging the services of a person in order to perform various tasks. So we'll talk more about this fiduciary obligation in just a minute, but basically evolving from the master-servant relationship, the servant owed their loyalty to the master, and they put their best interests of the master before anyone else's, including their own. So when I go out to help a buyer to buy a house, and they want to make an offer, and let's say the house is $200,000 list price. Might it be in the best interest of my buyer to pay $190,000 instead of $200,000 for that house? Might it be in their best interest? Absolutely. The lower the price, the better. Is it in my best interest for them to pay $190,000 versus $200,000? No, because my commission is based on a percentage of the sale price. And so I can't say to them, you know what, I really don't think you should buy for $190,000 because I'm not going to make as much money. They'd laugh at me. They'd fire me. Right? So I have to set aside my best interests. And believe me, there are lots of situations where it is really not in my best interest. Sometimes you even have to tell sellers or buyers that you really don't think it's best that you work with them. What if somebody called me up and said, I've got $1 million mansion just outside of Charlotte, and I want you to sell it. 3%. Wow, that's a lot of money, right? Well, do I know anything about the market just outside of Charlotte? No. So, as tempting as it is, even though I can sell real estate anywhere in the state of North Carolina, I probably shouldn't be selling houses just outside of Charlotte. Now, can I refer business to somebody else and get a little cut of that? Absolutely. But I would be doing that person a disservice if I tried to say that I was an expert in the Charlotte market. It's a totally different area. So you need to be careful about that and make sure that you're looking out for the best interests of your client. Now, I've sold stuff in the Greensboro area that were a little bit out of my comfort zone. For instance, I sold multi-family housing, a 5-plex, which was just a big house with 5 apartments in it. And I'll tell you that it was a totally different animal than selling a single-family home. And I learned a lot, and probably, you know, I was stretching in order to do that. But I tried to get as much help from other people to know what I was doing. And now I feel fairly confident that if another 5-plex come along, I probably would be able to know better what I'm doing with that. So we want to make sure that we're looking out for the best interests of our clients, regardless of the situation. So essentially, in the common law of agency, we've exchanged this master-servant idea for the client or principal and the firm or agent. So the thing to know about this is not a law. The common law of agency is not in some book somewhere. It is a collection of traditions and ways that the courts have acted over time. And so this collection of traditions and so forth have created this common law of agency. So not one law, but just developed over custom, usage, judgments, and decrees of the courts, but not the state statutes. So what governs brokerage relationship? Well, not just the common law of agency, but also real laws, contract laws that the state has developed, the real estate license law, the North Carolina Real Estate Commission rules. So the Real Estate Commission rules are not laws, but they are what bind us as real estate brokers to follow. And so we got to make sure that we, abide by all of that. So the basic framework of the law of agency has not changed very much. The application of it certainly has over time. But who does the agent represent is the real question. And sometimes it's a little, it's hard to tell. Just because I am showing somebody property doesn't mean that I am their agent, right? I may, for instance, on Sunday I had an open house at my listing. So people came and they looked at the house and I showed them all the parts of the house and things that are good and bad about the house, well, mostly good. And so was I representing them? No, not at all. In fact, I was representing my seller, and it was up to me to represent them well, to make sure that I'm highlighting the good stuff about this place. And of course, I have to be honest, truthful with third parties. That's one of the rules, is that even if I'm not working for them, if I'm just working with them, I still have to be honest about whatever I tell them. So maybe my seller says, well, yeah, I know I got a little bit of mold growing back in that back closet, but just don't let them look in there because, I don't want to give that away. Well, that's a material fact, right? And so if I have a little mold growing back in the back closet, now that wouldn't necessarily, point it out to them unless they were particularly interested in the house. But there was no mold in the house, just by the way. Just saying that. But certainly material facts have to be disclosed to anybody that's interested in the house. But my fiduciary relationship is only with my principal, my client. So how will the agent cooperate with other firms? All of these are questions that have to be answered sort of up front. For instance, I'll talk about this later on. If somebody wants to see a house, let's say somebody called me up and said there's a RE/MAX house around the corner that they'd like to see. Will you show it to me? And I say, sure, I'll come show it to you. And I say, are you working with a buyer's agent? And they say, no. And they say, well, that's fine. I just want you to know that I would be glad to work for you as your buyer's agent. I'm not listing this home. This is not an Allen Tate home. And so I can represent you for this home. And they say, no, I don't want you to represent me as a buyer's agent. We say, well, I have to represent somebody, so I'm either representing you or I'm representing the seller. So it's your choice. If I represent the seller, whatever you tell me, I have to tell the seller, right? Anything you tell me that would be, helpful to the seller, I have to tell them. So you have to kind of, walk them through that a little bit. It's not exactly how we necessarily would do it, but certainly you have to disclose who you're working for. And maybe they choose to work with you, and you can work for them, or maybe you just work with them. Have any of you ever been to an open house or a model home for a subdivision, a new construction? This nice man or lady there to help you, to show you all the amenities of these houses and so forth. Who are they working for? They're working for the builder, right? Working for the seller. So even though they're very helpful and kind and wonderful and sweet, they're not working for you. All right. It just says, I'm just saying maybe we should look for another real estate agent. You want to make sure that you're representing your client well. So agency is a relationship. What kind of relationship is it? A fiduciary relationship. So an agent is placed in a position of trust and confidence, and we use this old car to help us remember what all the pieces of that are, including obedience, loyalty, disclosure, confidentiality, accounting for funds, and reasonable skill and care. Certainly, we'll go through each of these a little more detail soon, but as new agents, probably the hardest one is this reasonable skill and care part, because you don't have any skill yet, or you don't have any knowledge about stuff, or you have limited knowledge about stuff. And so where do you get that? Well, your clients are depending on you, so you want to make sure that you're associating yourself with other brokers. When we started, I said one of the reasons I went to Allen Tate was because there are people that were more knowledgeable about real estate than me, even though I'd been in business for a long time before that, 10 years. But there's more to learn every day. And so I love the fact that if I run into something new, I can go to one of the agents in my office that have been doing this a long time, and I can say, hey, have you ever faced this? Have you ever seen this before? Have you ever had this happen? And they'll say, yeah, I've faced that before. The first time that I had a buried tank that had leaked under the house, I needed some help because I hadn't really dealt with that before. So I go to my colleagues. And so, getting that reasonable skill and care, you don't necessarily have to own it all yet, but you need to get it. And so you need to make sure that you have mentors and helpers around you that can kind of fill in those blanks. So who is the agent? In most cases it is the firm, right. Just hammer that in. So the firm is the person, agency is the relationship, right? So the agent is the firm, the agency is the relationship. Now sometimes we refer to individuals as being an agent, but most often we're talking about the firm. The principal, I'm not talking about the guy who called you in when you were in, elementary school and got in trouble. We're talking about the person that the agent, the firm, represents. So the client, in a real estate transaction, who might the principal be? Buyer, seller. Come on, you folks in the back. Who else? Who else could be a principal besides a buyer and a seller working in real estate?
A landlord?
Good, a landlord, yes. And what would be on the other side of that deal? A tenant, right. So all of those could be principals, and you could work for them. There are people that work exclusively with buyers. Others work exclusively with sellers. Some people work to find rentals for people. But all of those could be principals. So a principal is owed all of those fiduciary duties. Can an individual broker be an agent? Can I be an agent? Answer is yes, but who am I an agent for? Alan Tate. I am an agent of an agent, right? An agent of an agent. So we call that a subagent. Subagent. So I am a subagent to my clients. Now, even though I'll say I'll be your agent, what I probably should say is I'll be a subagent to you, but they wouldn't know what that means, right? But I am a subagent to my buyers and sellers. So subagent is one who's employed by a person already acting as an agent. An agent of an agent. An individual broker is the subagent to the client, to the buyer or seller. Now, I will just tell you that one of the most frequently missed questions has to do with this, where people think, okay, I'm a subagent of Alan Tate. No, I'm a subagent of my seller or buyer. My seller or buyer. I have a subagency relationship to my seller or buyer. Not to Alan Tate, because I am an agent to Alan Tate. What is Alan Tate to me? No. What is Alan Tate? If I'm the agent, what would that make them? That would make them my principal. They're my client. Right? So in that case, I'm an agent to Alan Tate, they're my principal. Alan Tate is the agent of the buyer or seller. They're Alan Tate's principal. Clear as mud?
No.
Yes.
Can you repeat that again?
Yes. So, Wayne Young is an agent to Alan Tate. I'm a subagent to this client. Alan Tate is an agent of the client. Make sense now? Kind of? Better? So the thing to keep in mind is just this right here, that the firm is always going to be the agent of the client, of the buyer, seller, tenant, landlord. It's going to be the firm as the agent. Since I'm working for the firm, I am an agent for the firm. By the way, am I an employee of Alan Tate?
Depends if your
I'm
salary or
not.
not.
No, I'm not an employee, not in the strictest sense. I don't get a 1099, is that right?
No.
You do get a
W-2.
W-2. I don't get a W-2 from, obviously somebody else does my taxes. So I don't get a W-2 from Alan Tate because I'm a subcontractor.
So you would get a
You
1099.
get a 1099.
Yes, I get a 1099 and not a W-2. And so, but I'm still an agent of Alan Tate. And in fact, I signed an agreement with Alan Tate to be their agent. And it has lots of rules about how we act as a firm and as brokers of the firm. So subagency is a relationship between the subagent and the principal. So this is what guides my work with my buyers and sellers, is my sub-agency agreement. Now, since I'm working as an agent of Allen Tate, basically, Allen Tate is hired by my principal to buy or sell real estate. And I am Allen Tate's representative, right? So I always tell my sellers, for instance, I say, now you're hiring Allen Tate to sell your house. If I die tomorrow, get run over by a truck, have a heart attack, whatever, they're gonna take care of you. You're still gonna be in a relationship with Allen Tate. It doesn't have to do with me, right? And so, that, I'm sure that just puts them right at ease. But what kind of relationship do I have with my principals? As a sub-agent of that principal, I have a fiduciary relationship, yeah. So my firm's fiduciary relationship to that client carries over to me. Make sure that I'm looking out for their best interests. Now here's where it gets kind of crazy. Here we have the term a sub-agent of the seller. Sub-agent of the seller. So a broker is working with a buyer, but not representing the buyer. Is working with a buyer, but not for the buyer. Example, you go to that open house at the new subdivision, they have a model home and there's somebody there that can help you to pick out the light fixtures that are going to go in the house, what kind of flooring, everything about this new house that you're going to buy. Who are they working for? They're working for the builder, the seller, right? So they're working with the buyer, but not for the buyer, because they are a sub-agent of the seller, right? Now, and they're actually working against the buyer, right? So agency is the fiduciary relationship between the principal and the agent. The sub-agency, the fiduciary relationship between the sub-agent and the principal, not between the broker and the firm. That's an agency relationship, not sub-agency. Again, that's one of those trip points. A customer. So we use the term customer to relate to be third parties. So for instance, when I have that open house, somebody shows up at my open house, they are a customer, right? They become a client when they hire Allen Tate to be their buyer's agent, right? But until then, they're a customer. And you don't owe any fiduciary relationships, responsibilities, but you do have to give them factual information, have to be fair and honest with everything. So we're working with a customer, but for a client. When somebody comes to my house, I can tell them all about the house. Can I tell them how much they should offer for the house? Well, I could. I could tell them the list price is $200,000. And they say, well, but how much, really, how much will it take? And I'll say, they listed for $200,000. That's how much they want. So here's a graphic sort of way to look at this. A client is represented by the firm. A customer is not represented. So there's no connection to that firm. Property management contract. The owner hires a firm to manage their property. Who's the principal? The landlord, right. Who's landlord? Who's the agent? The firm. Who's the client? The landlord. Who's the customer? Tenants. Who's the sub-agent? individual broker, right? Okay, does it make sense? All right. So, a little bit of history for this whole relationship thing. I grew up in Texas, so anytime I mention history, I have to mention the Alamo. Remember the Alamo and all that. When I was a teacher, we used to take our seventh graders to on a tour of Texas, and we'd go to the Alamo. And right over here is the Menger Hotel. It sits right next to the Alamo, and it's the oldest hotel in Texas. And so we would get off the bus, and we had really great students. They would be dutifully taking notes, and the history teacher is telling them all about the Alamo. And the history teacher had a kind of mischievous streak, though, and he would play little tricks on the kids every once in a while. So we get off the bus, and they're taking notes about the Alamo, and he says, over here is the Menger Hotel. It's the oldest hotel in Texas. And of course, the Mexicans would get up on top of the hotel and they would fire down on the Alamo, making it very difficult for the Texans inside the Alamo. Well, of course, finally, everybody's writing dutifully, and some kid would raise their hand and go, "Was that hotel built from the Alamo?" No, it wasn't. A little tricky. But prior to real estate agency, how did you find a buyer for your home? So before there were real estate offices with real estate agents waiting to help you to buy or sell real estate, how did they get houses sold, for goodness sakes? How did you find a buyer?
Word of mouth.
Word of mouth. You told the guy at the barber shop, right? And he told everybody else that was hanging out at the barber shop, or the general store. You told your friends and your relatives, your neighbors, and somebody finally came knocking at your door and said, "Hey, I heard you were thinking about selling your land." Right? And they could work this out. Maybe they just have a handshake, sell this property, right? Okay. Today we have a 14-page contract, right? But back then, all it took was to say, "Yeah, I'll sell you my land." Sign the deed, right? So it was pretty simple. But once brokers were involved in these listings, sometimes there'd be, well, for instance, sometimes there'd be multiple signs. One of the first things that happened was where a seller could hire as many brokers as they wanted to. They could all put signs in the front yard, and whoever sold the house got the commission. Can you imagine if you had like 10 different real estate signs in your front yard, and whoever was lucky enough to find the buyer first, they're the ones that got the commission. And if the seller found the buyer, then everybody was out of luck, right? That must have been kind of scary. I'm glad that I wasn't in business back then. But you can imagine that there's quite a change there now. So we'll have a little fun with this. I don't know if any of you are old enough to even know what a radio theater was, but at one time, all of the entertainment came over the radio. So I'm going to ask a few of you to help me out here. A little radio. You remember what a radio?
No, she said that was older than her.
Older than her, yeah. Well, I'm sure. So we have a little scene here, and I'm gonna ask a few of you to help me out. And since you spoke up first, I'm gonna let you be Bonnie. And would you mind being Alan Tate for me?
Oh, boy.
And let's see. I need this one. I don't need Sam. Sam doesn't have any lines, but he's very important to the transition. All right. So. There'd normally be some dramatic music here, So just imagine in your head some dramatic music. I haven't figured out how to do this. There you go, there you go. Perfect. So the year is 1960. Mr. and Mrs. Jim Bowie have decided to look for a house. Mrs. Bonnie Bowie sees a sign in front of 123 Alamo Boulevard. Get it? Yeah, Bowie, yeah. Anyway, the home's listed by Allen Tate Realtors. And so she decides to call about the house. And the agent, Mr. Allen Tate himself, takes the call. It goes something like this.
Good morning, Alan Tate Realtors. This is Alan. How may I help you, sir, ma'am?
Hello, I'm calling about the house at 123 Alamo Boulevard.
Why, hello. This sounds like Bonnie Bowie. Is that you, Bonnie?
Yes, hi Alan, how are you?
I'm fine. I haven't seen you at the church potlucks lately. How are the kids?
They're just fine. About the house.
Oh, yeah, sure. Listen, why don't you come down to the real estate shop? I'll give you the info on Alamo Boulevard and maybe a few others that we have listed, and we'll go together and take a look at them. Can you come this afternoon?
Sure, how about 2?
That's peachy. See you at 2.
These guys are good. They're the best radio actors I've ever had. So Bonnie goes down to Allen Tate, and Alan pulls out a very large notebook, something like this, right? And shows Bonnie information and a picture or two about various homes. So who do you suppose Allen Tate Realtors is working for? It's working for the sellers in that book. And Mr. Allen Tate, the broker, yeah, he's working for the sellers too. So Alan gets the keys. There were no lock boxes back then. And they go to view Alamo Boulevard and 2 more houses that day. And nothing thrilled her. Over the next few weeks, she shows her a dozen more. And they're now back at the shop, and Bonnie looks, well, disappointed.
So, Bonnie, what did you think? The last hacienda was perfect for you. Are you ready for me to write up a contract? It'll only take a few minutes.
No, actually none of them were really what I was looking for. I did, however, see a swell one on Jefferson. I think it was listed by Toast and Little Realty, and it looks so cute. Do you think we could look at that one?
I need to give Toast and Little a call and see what I can set up. I'll call you tomorrow, okay?
Sure. Boy, I sure am glad I have you to educate me about these houses. I never would have known about the different things of siding or roofing, or even which houses offer the best deal for our family. Thanks, Alan. I'm so glad you're looking out for me.
Yeah, sure. Glad to help.
So Alan calls Sam Toast at Toast and Little Realty the next morning, and the conversation goes, well, something like this.
Hey, Sam, I got a buyer who saw your sign on Jefferson Street. Is it still for sale?
Yes, great house. Why don't you just send your buyer over and I'll be glad to take care of her.
Now, Alan's been hauling her butt around for weeks now. Is he inclined to hand over his buyer to this broker at Toast and Little?
No.
No, he wants to get paid. So he says,
How about this, Sam? I'll come over and get the key, show the house, and if she likes it, I'll write up the offer, and you and I can split the commission.
Dun, dun, dun. So will Sam split his commission? Can Bonnie?
I don't like the house. We're going to go look more.
Can Bonnie get the best deal working with these 2 brokers? Where will the seller spend all his money when he makes out like a bandit because of this arrangement? These and many more questions will be answered on the next Jan Secor Radio Hour. So can Sam do that? Can he split his commission? What do you think, Sam? You gonna split your commission?
I wouldn't want to.
You wouldn't want to, but you want to sell the house, right? And you got a ready,
Someone's
willing,
better
and
than
able
none.
buyer here, so why not, right? Sure. So what we would call that is a co-broker situation. We have two firms, each of them working together to try to find a buyer for this house. Who's Alan gonna be working for now? The answer is the seller of Sam's house, because he's not working for buying. You see, back then, they didn't have buyer's agency. There was no buyer's agent. Everybody worked for the sellers, whether it was your listing or not. Everybody worked for the seller. So, think about that for a minute. Imagine if you were, what do you think Bonnie thinks? Does Bonnie think that Alan is working for her? She sure does. And what if you thought that somebody was working for you, but they were really working for your competition? That's a pretty bad situation, right? You get in a divorce and you hire a lawyer and you find out that your lawyer is actually working for your spouse. Could be bad, right? Could be very bad. So it's critical that this whole idea of who's working for whom be clarified. And in fact, how did this story end? Bonnie loved the house. They worked out a deal, and the agent with the agents to purchase it. But Bonnie always worried a little bit that she didn't quite get the best deal, right? And that happened a lot back in the 1960s and 70s. So first of all, thank you to our Jan Secor radio players. And I think at that, we're gonna stop and take another little break. That's the leg tonight. Oh, we're awesome. That was good.
Oh, well, thank you.